It gets me every time. But anyway, most of you would have heard of Austin Powers, who some would say was the greatest secret agent ever.
Yeah, baby! Yeah.
Now hold your horses there, Austin, as there was another international man of mystery that puts your antics to shame.
Good God.
This, of course, would be James Bond, but to appreciate 007 and his influence over popular culture such as video games, we have to go back to the past to learn more. The world's most famous secret agent was the creation of author Ian Fleming, who throughout his naval career came across a wide variety of interesting and colourful individuals. It was from these encounters that Ian would be inspired to create the basis for a legendary super spy. And thanks to a book and ornithology of all things, he now had a name for this super secret agent, and that name would be James Bond.
James Bond.
With a name that sounded smoother than a martini, Ian Fleming wrote Casino Royale, and from the success of this novel, many more books would follow.
Yes!
Eventually, the lights of the silver screen would soon beckon England's famous super spy with the classic Dr. No, which was a massive success and paved the way forward for more films starring 007.
Nice.
But the world of literature and entertainment wasn't the only place that James Bond would cast a shadow. Eventually, 007 would dip his toes into the realm of video games. Being the first game to star 007, Shaken Not Stirred was a text adventure, emulating some of the elements found within the novels. And from here, the world's famous super spy found himself gracing other gaming systems of the 80s. Some of these came in the form of the Commodore 64, the ZX Spectrum, and of course, the Atari 2600. Now the multitude of James Bond titles that appeared throughout the 80s all did their best to bring the world of 007 to life. And as time progressed, the secret agent would enter the world of 16-bit with James Bond, The Duel.
Oh my.
After the release of the 16-bit classic, James Bond's escapades into the world of video games would go on a slight hiatus for a number of years. That was until the period of 3D gaming.
Shut up and take my money!
Now when gamers of a certain age are asked which James Bond title is their favourite, 9 times out of 10 they'll come up with the same answer. So do me a favour, pause the video, comment which game you think this is, and we'll find out if you're right.
Okay.
Now the answer you may have come up with would have been the legendary GoldenEye, which for some gamers is the pinnacle of James Bond games. When GoldenEye graced the Nintendo 64, the spotlight within the world of gaming was shining over this classic. Following the plot of the film, the gameplay was near perfect, with amazing graphics for the time and plenty of challenges that would put even the best of gamers to the test. And such was the popularity surrounding GoldenEye that PlayStation owners were even trading in their grey box of entertainment for a Nintendo 64, just so they could get their hands on this masterpiece of a game.
You're goddamn right.
Sure, the single player campaign was fun to play, but it was the multiplayer that made GoldenEye such a masterpiece within the world of video games.
Wow.
And one of the unwritten rules for GoldenEye's multiplayer was not to use Oddjob no matter what. For old school gamers, we know exactly why that is. And for the naive of you, you're going to find out soon enough. It seemed that the world of gaming was going James Bond crazy, with many more titles appearing on gaming systems of the time, such as Tomorrow Never Dies and The World Is Not Enough. In fact, The World Is Not Enough was compared to GoldenEye quite a lot, and was well received by gamers and critics, which is a bit of an achievement considering that GoldenEye was near perfect. With the appearance of more powerful gaming systems, the world of video games would continue to be blessed with even more James Bond titles. Agent Under Fire and the underrated Nightfire had that suave and sophistication that James Bond was known for. For me, I would have to say that Nightfire is the better out of the two. Now don't get me wrong, Agent Under Fire is fun, but when it came to Nightfire, there was something about it that felt a bit, GoldenEye-ish.
What?
And speaking of the GoldenEye name, just imagine being able to play a new James Bond title, but as a rogue agent. This is exactly what happened with GoldenEye Rogue Agent, which saw gamers working for Goldfinger in a first-person action shooter adventure that would put a spin on the formula of James Bond. Despite having the wondrous GoldenEye in the title, Rogue Agent was a bit lackluster at best, but still fun to play, even with a slight nod to the 1960s that are found within this game.
Giggity giggity, giggity goo.
And speaking of the decade of bell bottoms and flower power, there is one film that came out in the era of the swinging 60s that was eventually made into a game decades later. From Russia with Love was a return to the classic era of Bond from the 1960s, with Sean Connery even reprising his role as 007. Being based on the film with the same name, From Russia with Love combined different styles of gameplay, each allowing gamers to live out their fantasy of being the world's most popular super spy. Everything from the gadgets to even the tones of Sean Connery made From Russia with Love a fun and an enjoyable game, with some fans of 007 reliving their childhood of the 60s. But sadly, the magic surrounding James Bond video games would soon start slowly fading.
No! God, please, no!
But all that changed when Daniel Craig took over the mantle of 007, which of course meant more video games surrounding James Bond. Quantum of Solace continued with the formula of the previous first-person shooter Bond games and was somewhat successful to a certain degree. Not necessarily a bad title, but gamers were expecting more, and in 2010 they got 2 more video games starring James Bond. Bloodstone confused gamers who'd become accustomed to the first-person style of gameplay. That made Nightfire, GoldenEye and The World Is Not Enough massively popular. This third-person action game played very similar to other titles such as Gears of War, Splinter Cell and the fantastic Uncharted, and Bloodstone would go on to have its own legions of fans, but on the same day of release, a classic from the 90s would come screaming back into the 2010s with a fresh coat of paint. GoldenEye 007 was a reimagining of the N64 classic, and while it retained many aspects of the original, much of the game had been modified to match the style of Daniel Craig's version of James Bond. GoldenEye 007 was a massive hit for the Nintendo Wii, and soon joined the ranks of one of the best games for this charming little console, alongside Super Smash Bros. Brawl, the Skyward Sword, and of course, Resident Evil 4. Oi, will you clear off? It's not even October yet. And to coincide with the 50th anniversary of the British super spy, 007 Legends was released, which retold some of the greatest escapades of James Bond. But out of all the many titles surrounding James Bond, I would have to say the best one is GoldenEye for the Nintendo 64. A fantastic game which I highly recommend you play.
It's so beautiful!
All in all, the game starring the world's most famous secret agent allowed gamers to step into the role of the super spy. And while some of the many titles surrounding James Bond have come and gone, there are a couple that have stood the test of time and are still as enjoyable to play as they were back then. Anyway, come back next time where I take a look at the Sega CD and its many games. Thank you so much for watching and see you next game.